Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Nastasia. Today I'm doing a little Bible study with you guys. Again, I keep changing it up how I do the format of these. This one is also a little bit different just because I'm not actually going to go through line by line every verse in the few chapters of Exodus, but I'm going to point out different verses that hit me really hard that I love. I don't know, just because I thought it'd be fun, and I'm very inspired by Exodus, and I just want to share that with you guys. So before I get into it, if you end up liking this video, give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you never miss out on a video every time I post. My Instagram is right here, where you can see all the behind the scenes of my life. And let's get into Exodus. So I just started Exodus the other day, and I love this book. I mean, I've read it before, but I started it again in my going through the Bible in a year thing, and sorry, I'm a little sleepy. I did not have any coffee today. There's a lot of goodness in Exodus. I'm obsessed with this chapter. If you're not familiar with it, it is the story of Moses and God separating the Red Sea and the Egyptians and God rescuing his people, and it's just such an amazing book. I love it so much. I think there's a lot of trust and faith that can be found in Exodus. So where I actually want to kind of start is in chapter 3. So this is after Moses has been born and raised, and he got driven out kind of by the Egyptians, and he is now living in the desert, and God comes to him through a burning bush and speaks to him. And so I'm going to start reading here. So he's speaking to Moses through the burning bush. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to go to good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And in verse 10 it says, Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, But I will be with you. God said, But I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. And then later on, in verse 16 through 17, it says, God is saying, Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, The Lord of God of your fathers, the God of Abraham and Isaac, of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you, what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt. I love that, because I don't know why, but it's just there's something so sweet and intimate to me about him saying, I promise, I promise you. I feel like it's, it's the same thing as a covenant, it's like a promise, but there's something so cool to me that the God of the universe, the God of everything, most powerful being ever, is looking down on his people and saying, I promise you, I will save you. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who thinks that's so sweet, but I just love that. And I also love the part earlier in verse 12, 11, where Moses said, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children out of Egypt? And God said, But I will be with you. And I love this because it's the world is telling us nowadays all the time, no, don't doubt yourself, you're incredible, you're amazing, you're this or that. And I'm not saying that's bad. I do pep talks on here all the time, and I'm trying to encourage other people. But when it comes to these big tasks, literally setting a people free, God in no way tells Moses no, you can do it, I believe in you, I trust you. He's saying, I'll be with you. You have nothing to fear because I am God of everything. It doesn't matter whether you doubt yourself or not, because it's not based on your ability. It's based on my sovereignty. It's based on my love for my people and my power. I'm not going to let anything happen to you or them because I am God. This doesn't have to be on you. I have chosen you, and I'll be with you. Oh, I just feel like we could all use that. And then after verse 17, the promise, he's still telling Moses like what he's gonna do, and he's like, I'm gonna harden Pharaoh's heart, like you're gonna do this and this, but then this will happen, literally spelling it out for him. And Moses still goes kind of against God and says, but then Moses answered, this is chapter 4, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. And the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. And God said, throw it on the ground. So Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. And I just want to pause on this a second. I heard a sermon a few years ago on Exodus from Matt Chandler from the Village Church, and it just like changed my life. If I can find it, I'll link it down below. It's so good. They did a whole like year on Exodus, and I strongly encourage you listen to them. It's bomb. But what I didn't notice about this verses in particular is that, so he says, throw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. So something Matt Chandler was saying, and I might butcher it, I don't mean to, but something he was saying was that Moses, you know, working on the land and being in the desert and stuff like that, he was pretty comfortable with snakes. You know, you see snakes all the time and stuff, but this snake, the serpent that this staff became, was so, I don't know, dangerous or whatever it was, or scary, that it says Moses ran from it. It was that intense, okay? So just keep that in mind. He threw down the staff, it became a serpent. And then God says, put out your hand and catch it by its tail. He does not say, touch it and it'll turn back into a staff so it won't hurt you. He says, hold it by its tail. Moses doesn't know what's going to happen at this point. It's just, all right, that's a snake now. And God's saying, yeah, it is a dangerous one. Go lift it up. And Moses said, it says, so he put it out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. This is also what blew my mind, is it didn't become a staff before he touched it. It became a staff in his hand. Sometimes, most of the time, when God's calling you to obey him and walk in faith, he's not always going to tell you exactly what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. Sometimes he does, but a lot of times he'll say, hey, catch that tail of the snake. And you'll say, I don't know if you see this, but that's a snake. Like, that's gonna hurt me. And not only that, but I just thought of this too. If you catch a snake by its tail, the head can come all the way around and bite you. A lot of people, what they'll do when they'll catch snakes or be trying to catch a snake, they'll take it by its neck and they'll grab it and pull it up so that you're holding it and it can't bite you. But God says, take that snake by its tail. That's even more trust. And, you know, you might be thinking like, well, duh, of course Moses is going to trust him. He just watched him turn a staff into a snake. He'd be dumb not to be like, oh yeah, God will protect me. But like, can you imagine being in this situation? Like, it'd be a little different. And then the next part. Again, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. So like in your pocket, basically. And he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. So leprosy was like the biggest disease back then. From what I know, I mean, I'm not a leprosy expert, but it was very, very, very contagious. And when you had leprosy, like, you were gonna die. Like, being a leper, you were like basically exiled or shunned. Like, nobody was around you at all because it was that like dangerous again. And he could have freaked out at this point. And we don't know the time that passed between this. Like, we don't know if God just let his arm hang out like that for a while or what. But then it says, put your hand back inside your cloak. So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. So what do these two things tell us so far? Well, from what it seems to me, God is saying, whatever danger is put in your way, I'm in control of it. You can grab that snake by the tail because I'm in control. And then whatever injuries, whatever disease, whatever you may fear, I'm in control of it. I am the one who can control disease. I am the one who is the great healer, the great protector. That's what those two to me are saying. And then this one, it says, if they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe either of these two signs, so the staff turning into a snake or the leprosy, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile, like the Nile River, pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. So this was another risk that you might not even notice, because I didn't until I really my eyes were open to it in that sermon, and I've thought about it over the years. It says the water will become blood on the dry ground. So think about that. When you're in front of Pharaoh, you're in front of all his servants, you're in front of the people of Israel, you're in front of all these people trying to prove that God spoke to you, and you also have kind of a speech impediment because Moses does have one. We're going to get to that in a second. You're completely unqualified for this in every sense. And they're like, yeah, okay, let's see what you can do. And you take a cup of water from this river and you start pouring it out, and it's still water, and it's still water, and it's going down, and it's still water, and you're very tense because you're thinking, what? This is supposed to be blood now. But it says that it will become blood on the dry ground. There was no time for Moses to have anything but trust. When he pours out that water, it's not like he can look in the cup and be like, okay, it's blood, perfect. It's gonna make me look good or something. It's gonna prove to people that I was talking to God. He pours it out, and once it hits the ground, when it's too late for any take-backs, when it's too late to be like, I'm just kidding, guys, that was silly, I didn't mean, not a real miracle, I'm just gonna go. He pours it out, and once it hits the dry ground, that's when it turns to blood. Again, you might not think that's a big deal, but for me, it's like you see the faithfulness and the promise and the trust in God to the last moment. A lot of times God will show us what's going to happen beforehand, like I was saying earlier, and be like, you know what, this is how it's going to happen, or this, or give us some forewarning. But sometimes he'll say, you're just going to have to trust me. Yeah, it's going to turn to blood on the ground. Or when you touch the snake, it's going to turn into a staff. Or after you have leprosy, I'm going to heal you. Because that shows the glory of God more in this context than if none of that would have happened at all. It's the miraculousness of God. All right, and next, this is verse 10 in chapter 4. Moses said to the Lord, this is what I'm talking about with the speech impediment. Oh my Lord, I am not eloquent either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. So he's saying, like, I can't talk to Pharaoh. What do you think? I'm going to let your people go? I can't even form a sentence. And the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go. I will be within your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. So again, this is like, I feel like this is me wrapped up in a little bow on this page, because God can show me over and over all these miraculous things of how he is in control, and I'll still be caught up on my own insecurities. I'll still be caught up on, yeah, I see all that you can do, but look, I can't do this. And again, he's saying, this isn't about you. This isn't about your ability. This is about mine. I protect you. Who makes the mouth? Me. You don't think I can make you speak? Who makes the rivers and the waters? Who makes the skies and the heavens? Like, don't you think I can do anything? And it's just so hilarious to me, because I often will see this and be like, geez, Moses, what are you thinking? And then I'm like, reality check, Stas, you do this daily. Because like every other day, God will point out all the different ways he's been faithful to me. And then I'll be like, yeah, but like, what if we don't have enough money? And sometimes I wonder if God's just like, are you listening? Like, so as much as I can get prideful and be like, come on, Moses, I know I'm literally just as bad. And just in general, in the book of Exodus, I feel like so many times there's so much symbolism if you read it and like look closely, with the lamb and Passover and it being a symbolic representation of how God's going to redeem and save his people with his son Jesus, and being the blemish-free lamb that pays for the sins of everybody. And it's just so cool to see it, because this was in Moses' day when, you know, they talked of a savior in the prophecies, but they didn't realize, I don't think, all the symbolism that was happening among them to point them straight to Christ. Like, it's so cool to me. Like, once you know the gospel, like, pretty well of Jesus and the different symbols for him, you see them all over Scripture, all over in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, in Revelation, in Genesis even. Like, it's just so cool. And even the serpent, I might be reading into this, but I mean, I also don't think I am, but like, in Genesis, the serpent is the one who deceives Eve. It's Satan in the form of a serpent. And it's very interesting to me that God turns the staff into a serpent and tells Moses, grab it. And he grabs it and it turns back into a staff. It's like God has full control, you know, over all evil. And I wonder if that was even a representation of, like, even when the serpent emerges, I have full control and I give you this power to perform this miracle. I give you authority over this serpent. Like, that's just beyond cool to me. I don't know. And one more thing I actually wanted to mention, I might do a whole kind of video on this, but I wanted to mention it really quick because I've been talking on my channel about the law of attraction and the scary parts of it and the darkness and the power of darkness that it calls upon, especially in my first video, and how law of attraction does work. And it's because it calls on the powers of evil. And for a long time I thought, well, if it works, that it can't be evil, it must be of God, because God is the one with power. But I just want to point out here in Exodus even, God is not the only one with power. He is the one with the most power, and he always wins, always. But Satan has authority too. Just, he doesn't have authority over us, but he has authority over certain powers of darkness. And so, for instance, the first plague, the water turned into blood. So Moses and Aaron, they go to the Nile, and I believe the Lord tells Moses to tell Aaron to put his staff in. So Aaron is Moses' brother that helps him with all this. He puts his staff in the Nile and it turns to blood. And so it's a miracle that's in a bad way. Like, that's crazy. And so it's trying to convince, like, the Egyptians, and Pharaoh, like, oh, maybe I should take this seriously. But then Pharaoh calls on his sorcerers and magicians, which pulled on dark powers. And it says, but the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he would not listen to them. And I just think this is very important to note. They also, this is said later on too, when he shows him the serpent. He throws down his staff in front of Pharaoh, or maybe it's earlier on, and it turns into a serpent. He calls upon his magicians then, Pharaoh does, and magicians and his sorcerers, and they're able to do the same thing. But it's not by the power of God that they can do it. It's by the power of the enemy. And this is very important for you to know, that yes, things can happen. Law of attraction does work. All these things, but at the cost of your soul. Like, at the cost of you pulling from the powers of evil to make this happen. And also part of that is when he does throw down his staff. I'll have to find the verse. I'll put it on the screen for you so you can look it up, because I can't find it right now. But when Moses does throw down his staff and it turns into a serpent in front of Pharaoh, and then the magicians throw down their staffs and they turn into serpents, the serpent of Moses' staff swallows the other serpents. That's a huge symbolism for the fact that, yeah, Satan has power, but God is the most powerful. God is always in control. God has authority. So if you're looking to dabble in these dark arts and stuff like that, just to gain power, you will be swallowed whole by the power of God, because that is not of God to do, for you to be dabbling in darkness. So I just want to put that out there because I thought it was really interesting that it's just as relevant today as it was literally in Exodus. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little kind of random Bible study. I'll probably do another one on Exodus soon, and let me know down below what you took from this. But I'll see you guys soon. Love you so much. Bye.